I want to introduce Robin Rieck. His course is James Madison's Federalist paper number 10. It will start on June 14th and will be via Zoom. We have had many references to the Federalist papers in our past history courses, but this will be the first time that we specifically center on number 10 in detail and specificity. Number 10 is thought to be a crucial document for understanding the Constitution. And certainly this is very important to us now as we are looking at the sequence of events before and on January 6th. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you. So I was just reading some headlines over the last few days. I just thought I might mention these. Polarization in the US may be reaching an irreversible tipping point. As political polarization continues in the United States, a study produced by Ivy League sociologists suggests the nation may be spiraling towards a point of no return. Is democracy dying? After hopeful end of 20th century, the institutions wither worldwide. That was the National Post, December 16th. In the Summit for Democracy, President Biden said this: democracy doesn't happen by accident. We have to defend it, fight for it, strengthen it, renew it. So given our current situation, I thought it was a good idea to go back and dig into the foundational thinking that went into the design of the world's oldest existing democratic republic, ours, United States. Although the colonies were a backwater of sorts, the founding fathers were no slouches in terms of what their education or their study of history. James Madison, for example, had the most extensive library in politics and history probably in the world. So they knew, they understood, they had studied democracies. They called them popular governments. Now it's interesting, it's so interesting to me that the founding fathers were highly, highly skeptical of popular governments. They hated them basically, based on what history had shown them. And why did they hate them? Because they were unstable. They always had the tendency to devolve into one-person authoritarian systems. So they always started well, but they just were an unstable situation. Now, James Madison goes into all of this, and it's just, his logic is exquisite, and it's just fun to look at how he puts this all together. What was the fatal flaw of most of past popular governments? The founding fathers called them factions. We call them special interest groups. How the Constitution contains and guides this mortal flaw and its effects, moving it towards productive ends, is what this and many of the Federalist papers is all about. How do you take something so destructive and create a society based on it? So this is sort of paraphrasing James Madison about faction. By faction, I understand a number of citizens who are united and driven by some common impulse of passion or interest to gain something that is adverse to the rights of other citizens or adverse to permanent and aggregate interests of the community. That is, factions, groups of individuals, basically that's how human beings are, each highly motivated by a common self-interest to do what they can to gain advantage over other citizens and the common good. So this is the working basis that the founding fathers had. They were realistic about human nature, maybe a little bit pessimistic, nonetheless felt they could craft a mechanism to deal with it. So taxes, property distribution, commerce. Now it would be abortion, anti-abortion. What's fair? What's just? So why create a popular government given all this? Why did the founding fathers, despite their skepticism and distrust of popular governments and democracies, feel that the power had to ultimately rest in the hands of the people? There are no transcripts of the constitutional conventions, but these questions had to be tackled. And James Madison in Federalist paper number 10 does this. He looks at the fatal flaw of popular governments. He starts by burying down to the very root of human nature, that human tendency to not only be self-interested, but biased in terms of how each looks at the world. What they see as fair and what they see as just. Laying that foundation, he then shows how the US Constitution is specifically designed to realistically deal with the human tendency to gather in groups to gain advantage for oneself. So what did the founding fathers craft? Well, they crafted basically a gasoline engine. What I mean by this is a mechanism that takes a destructive force and contains it in such a way that that same force would promote and protect and do productive good. The analogy, the gasoline engine, gasoline itself is a highly destructive force, but when the destructive force is contained by a brilliant design, that destructive force is guided and focused to do productive work. So what do I plan to do in this class? Normally, I wouldn't dissect it as much as I want to do in the first. It's a two-class course. I'm going to go essentially paragraph by paragraph and lay out James Madison's argument. Just because I think opening up that design that he has is really amazing. So we'll look at Madison's realistic understanding of faction that's rooted in human nature. Why have a popular government despite its nature? And to me, one of the most critical things that Madison does that I haven't seen elsewhere is what is the most basic purpose of government? And that's linked to why a popular government is so important. There's a paragraph in there, and I've explored it, and many people don't quite get it. Why choose the representative government? Why a representative rather than a pure democracy? How does a representative specifically deal with those destructive factional forces? And then he also explores why a national government is by its nature superior to state and local governments. So that's essentially what I want to do in the first class, is really lay out his argument, his presentation of what this design that they had already come up with does. And in the second class, I'd like to then look at that design and apply it to our current situation.